It's my great pleasure to welcome Felix Nkulukusa, the Secretary to the Treasury of Zambia and CDE class of 2005, back to be today's CDE Per Jacobsson speaker. I'd like to thank the Per Jacobsson Foundation for their strong support of this initiative. We have benefited from it greatly. Let me tell you briefly about Felix, but not too much because you'd rather hear from him. I'd also like to mention that we have two other Zambians here, in addition to Kelvis. We have Willis Chipango from the CDE class of 2009. Willis is the Director of Budget at the Ministry of Finance and National Planning in Zambia. And we have Mwenda Lubasi, who works closely with Felix. And is it fair to say, Mwenda, that you're a colleague of Kelvis? You'll accept that? Very good. So Felix was memorable as a student, both for his straightforward responses to questions and for his strong voice, which you'll have a chance to experience soon. I understand that can still reverberate through the halls at the Ministry of Finance and National Planning. After Felix was a CDE fellow, he returned home and was head of tax policy for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. He also, during that time, urged that Professor Bakia initiate a tax policy course for the second semester because some people like tax. Not everyone, but some, yes. Then Felix was promoted to lead work on economic management for Zambia, and in 2012 to 2015, he was permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance. He stepped away for some years after that, but gained valuable experience working for the European Union, the World Bank, and DFID of the UK as a consultant, which I think he will illustrate to you. It's good to have friends in many places. Then Felix was called to return in 2021 and has been Secretary to the Treasury since. In his spare time, which isn't much, he's also worked with an energy, a renewable energy company, and I understand he has a farm. So you'll hear more about that later. Felix, before coming to the CDE, he studied economics at the University of Zambia, and he's taught components of a public finance or public economics course as well at the University of Zambia. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Felix Nkulukusa.
So thank you very much, Tom, for that. Way back in 2004, Tom came to Zambia, and I had read a bit about Williams College, and I had made up my mind that I would come to Williams College. And Tom came to Zambia, and I spoke to Tom, and I believed that I needed to come and do development economics. At that time, we had a project that was funded by the British government under the DFID, which is now FCDO. And under that project, I was given a scholarship. And the scholarship was for me to go and do my graduate degree at Bath University in UK. And I said I wanted to come to Williams College. And they tried to influence me, and I refused. And then they went to our deputy minister and tried to talk to our deputy minister to try and ask me to go to Bath University. And our deputy minister then told the project team that they should find someone they would sponsor, and that because they wanted me to do what I wanted, that the government of Zambia would sponsor me to come to Williams College. And the British government then immediately went back and got an exemption. And I think in the history of Williams, I was the first student that was sponsored by the British government to study in America. And that gave me a leverage that everywhere where we went, as a class of 2005, I was the motivational speaker, and probably that is what gave me the courage to start speaking publicly to everyone. So in today's discussion, I basically just wanted us to look at how you can progress your career as a result of what you learn from Williams College. I will tell you that we have several graduates in the Ministry of Finance in Zambia. Some of them have got PhDs, but the application of their knowledge is completely different. And when I came back from Williams College, throughout my career in government from 2006, after I finished, to 2015, then I went out from 2015 to 2021, and I'm back in the government. I have always been identified as a champion of change. And behind me, there are several other colleagues. Most of them came to Williams College. Willis is one of them, who is now heading the budget directorate. We have another officer, Crane, who is now heading some projects within the Ministry of Finance. We have several of them that did that. So I thought I could talk to you, first and foremost, about what I learned from Williams College and how we have applied what we learned from Williams College, and I'll try to show you some comparison of where policy decisions make sense. And unfortunately for you, probably you didn't find Professor Henry Bruton, who basically was teaching development economics. But one thing that Professor Henry Bruton always said was that when you prepare a policy package, and you submit it to your government for consideration, and it is not considered, it's not that the package is not good, but probably you haven't prepared it well. Go back and prepare it until one day that policy package will be accepted. There's also one theory that Professor Bakia taught me. Professor Bakia was my lecturer, and the theory was that when you see something happens and followed by another thing happen, there could be some correlation, but there could be some causality of that happens. And I will try to demonstrate today, and it will be up to us to be able to look at, is it a correlation or is it a causality effect that brings about that? I won't speak about my personal, because I think Tom has already talked about it. Just to say that I have got 3 children. I married, and my first child was born 2 years before I came to Williams. And when you look at the what do you call that book that we do, and you read my story, I talk about how difficult it was to leave a family that had just started with my daughter 2 years, and I came to Williams College for a year. But just to say that besides what I do, I always want to find something, and Professor Bruton again called coping up strategy. There are some times, especially in Africa, where your salaries are not enough. And I always encourage my colleagues, don't go and steal from the public resources, because you are entrusted to protect the public resources. And the best thing that you can do is try to find something else that you can be able to do to cope up. And Professor Bruton always called it coping up strategy. So in my coping up strategy, I do some farming, I do cattle rearing, and I do some crop. I won't go into the education. I think, again, they already talked about it. Just to say that as I was a junior economist in the Ministry of Finance, I was in the tax policy unity, and I did a bit of some study before finishing, before coming to Williams in tax policy analysis and revenue forecasting. And when I completed my degree here, I thought of going back, and I did a course in decentralization at Duke University just to make sure that I open up what I do. Why did I come to Williams College, and why did I choose to study economics? I think the choice of studying economics, I was still young. My father decided on my behalf. My father was a farmer, had never been to school. My mother was a farmer, had never been to school, but they always believed and they heard that when you become an economist, you'll be able to make decisions. And my father would always tell me, I want to be proud one day that you'll be able to make decisions for the country. Unfortunately, before I reached that stage, he died. I hope he's proud in his grave. Reason why I joined the Ministry of Finance again, when I completed my university in 1995, most of you were not born probably, I then went and started working for the private sector. And my supervisor in the private sector is the one who told me, he always says, young man, you are so intelligent. In the private sector, you are wasting your time. Go into government, and government will educate you, government will expose you. Once you're educated and exposed, then you can come to private sector and make money. And when there was an opportunity and there was an advert in the Ministry of Finance, I was in some area, and my supervisor is the one who went on my file, got my documents, and did an application letter for a job for me. And then he sent, that time there were no phone calls, he sent a courier van with a copy of the letter that he has submitted, and he told me, when they call you for interviews, you attend this interview. And I went for that interview, and I got the job, and that's how I became an economist in the Ministry of Finance. What was my life before CDE? I basically was a tax policy analyst. And for me, at that time, I was satisfied if I did my work, I did the good policy, it meant that I have achieved what, it doesn't matter what others are doing. But when I came to Williams, I realized that you cannot have a policy in isolation. You have to have different policies that talk to each other. And you really need to make sure that you look at the economy moving. And from Williams College, then I realized that there was need for us to be able to answer a question. And Professor Bruton would always tell us that the whole study, the whole time that you are studying in Williams College, you will be answering just one question. Why do other countries develop when others are not developing? And once you answer that question, then you'll be able to develop. So whatever you are doing, the question that you'll be answering is the question of development. Why is your country developing and another country is not developing? Or why is your country not developing when other countries are developing? And there will be different places, and I will be able to demonstrate to you as I go into this presentation. I chose Williams College because I was looking at development and I wanted to be a development economist. And I will tell you that I'm very proud to be called a development economist. Although now I have gone beyond development economics, I'm more doing public financial management, and in my consultants I was always doing about public financial management. I think I've discussed about this, but the only thing I can say is that I had a very good relationship, and this is one of the good things about Williams College, is that we're living together as students. And for 2005, we still have a WhatsApp group where we meet, we talk, we discuss. Obviously, there are two colleagues that are always more vocal than all of us, but that's how life is. But we were together, so in the evenings we would watch TV together, we would cook together, we would eat together, and we became like a family. But we would also be together with the professors. Most of the lunches will be together with the professors. And it was very easy because wherever you are not clear, you would be able to go to a professor and ask the professor, I'm not clear on this, what does it mean? And the professor will be available for you to be able to pick you up. But there's also one of the issues that we saw, that there are some people that were slow in class that probably would not catch up. And here, obviously, we had some people that did not have economic background, and they came and started studying this. And the professors were always available to be able to tell us. And I would always compare with the University of Zambia. When I was in the University of Zambia, a professor would even be challenging you, you can never pass in my course. And they will set an exam that makes you fail in their course. But when we came here for the first time, after we finished writing the course, then it was us now to mark the professor. I'm sure that you'll be given that opportunity. I'm sure that practice is still there. That after they have given you, you write your exams, then they bring an exam. Now it is you to mark the professor. How is this professor? And that mark that you give the professor was considered very seriously, and we saw that there were people that were behind, and the professor would actually work with them and make sure that they bring them on board. The issue is not to make you fail or to make you pass, but to make sure that you contribute when you go back to your country. My takeaway is that first and foremost, you must be a champion of change. As you are going back, you must demonstrate that you are a champion of change. And you must make sure that you push for policy changes that you will be able to get it. Like I said, Professor Bruton said, if you make a policy proposal and it is not adopted, it's not that your proposal is the wrong one, but it is because you haven't prepared it properly. Go back and prepare it until that proposal is adopted. And we have seen that happen, and I'm very sure that when you finish your course, you'll be able to look at that. What happened when I left Williams and I went back to Zambia? The first thing is that I was identified by the Ministry of Finance Senior Management as one of the champions of change. And since then, whenever there is a reform that is taking place in the Ministry of Finance, even before I became ST, I always was drafted into that reform. Immediately I left Williams College, I went back. We now went into the development planning, and one day in 2005, we then had as a country a vision, and we called it Vision 2030, where we said we needed to be a prosperous middle-income country by the year 2030. Because now we are saying we needed to plan. And I was part of the team that was put to look at the vision, and there was my supervisor, unfortunately, he's late Mubanga. And we were put, and then we started now talking about this dream. What do we want to achieve? What are our socio-economic objectives? And we're talking about how we want education for all in Zambia, how we want health for care for all in Zambia, how we wanted clean water for everyone, and so forth and so on. And then after that vision, then we said, for us to be a prosperous middle-income country, we need to operationalize this vision through the national development plans. And in 2005, we then started drafting the National Development Plan. We had national development plans before. In 1960s, when we just got independence, and we stopped national development planning in 1972. And thereafter, in 2005, we said, let's go back to national development planning to operationalize our vision. And we prepared the 5th National Development Plan because 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th were prepared before. And in the 5th National Development Plan, we then said that we wanted macroeconomic stability as our objective for the 5th National Development Plan. And we said after we have macroeconomic stability, in the 6th National Development Plan, we are going to embark on infrastructure development. And in our 7th National Development Plan, we are going to embark on human service delivery and human capital development. And these national development plans were 5-year development plans. So the 2005, after I finished Williams College, we were talking about 2005 to 2010 as the 5th National Development Plan, where we needed to have macroeconomic stability. And we did achieve macroeconomic stability, and we wanted to be a prosperous middle-income country. By 2011, according to the World Bank ranking, we were in the lower middle-income country by the World Bank standards. And we started celebrating because now we are saying, we were talking about 2030, by 2011 we already had reached that level. And we then went in 2011, we went into the 60th National Development Plan, where we talked about infrastructure development. And this is where now understanding policy and the interaction of policy and the political can be able to be seen. because we said we wanted infrastructure development, and the whole 60th National Development Plan was developing infrastructure development. And the 60th National Development Plan, because we wanted to coincide it with the political cycle, we increased it by 1 year. Instead of ending in 2015, we said that it ends in 2016. And when we prepared that 60th National Development Plan, infrastructure development, and we started infrastructure development. But in 2015, there was a crisis. We had a drought. And that drought meant that our agriculture production had reduced. Our generation of electricity, because we depend on hydro, had also reduced, and we started having what we called load shedding, load management. So instead of having electricity the whole period, they will manage the electricity. Probably you have it for 12 hours, for 2 hours, whatever time was agreed at that time. However, because the plan said we have infrastructure development, there was an idea that infrastructure development could continue. And we continued with infrastructure development. And the only way we could continue with infrastructure development is borrowed money. And in 2014, we lost our president, and I was in charge of economic management in the Ministry of Finance. And Professor Bakia told me one thing, the impossible trinity. In economics, you cannot have inflation, interest rate, and exchange rate going in one direction. The simple definition of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods, isn't it? That's what we learned in our elementary. And if there's too much money chasing too few goods, it means that you have more money supply than the goods you have. And the cost of money is interest rate, isn't it? So if there's not too much money, what should happen to interest rate? Interest rate should be going down. So when you see inflation is going up, exchange rate is going up, interest rate is going up, it means there's a structural problem. And in 2014, when we lost our president, we started seeing that. And as a person in charge of economic management, we called for a meeting with the central bank and the Ministry of Finance to try and be able to interrogate this. And in the presentation, because I was in charge of economic management, I then told them that when I was at Williams College, I was taught about the impossible trinity. There is a problem here, and we need to fix this problem. And we are going towards the election because the president had died. And then they asked me, how do we fix this problem? And I told them the only way we can fix it is through a structural reform. If you have got a crack in the roof there, you better mend that crack before it reaches the foundation. Because if it reaches the foundation, you have to take down the whole building. And I propose that we mend that crack. But unfortunately, because of the political economy, one amongst us in that group then sent to the presidents that I was supporting the opposition, and this is why I was talking about a structural reform that meant fiscal consolidation so that there is no money for campaign. And the story was bought, and that was not taken, and I'll show you what happened thereafter. As a result of that, immediately the new government came into place in January 2015, and they formed their cabinet. I was the first person that was fired from the public service. And when I was fired in 2015, I then went into consultancy. I started undertaking consultancies, and I did consultancy with the World Bank. I was even at one time based in South Sudan. It was a non-family mission because of the war, so I would go home every now and then to check on my family. But I was doing some work in South Sudan, basically public financial management, supporting them on preparing the budget, making policy decisions, and so on and so forth. I also did some work in Zambia with the World Bank, where we are now introducing a new financing modality called Program for Results. And I was doing an assessment of the institutional framework that we have to be able to undertake that. I did consultants with the EU under the Increased Access to Electricity and Renewable Energy Program, where I was basically preparing what they call the program estimates, the budget, and then be able to implement that. I did a lot of work with the British government, fiduciary risk assessment of the Zambian public financial management, and I did some work with the USAID under the Power Africa Initiative, where I was the transaction advisor. For the whole period that I was in consultants, from 2015 to 2021, I never applied for a job, I never applied for consultancy. Every time someone was coming to knock on my door, if I've got space, can I be able to do that consultancy? And the institution that used to come and knock on my door are institutions like the World Bank, the EU, the British government, and so on and so forth. At the time that I was going back to the Ministry of Finance, I became an associate consultant with Crown Agents UK, and I had gotten a project in Liberia where I was supposed to head the PFM program in Liberia for 5 years. We had signed everything, but unfortunately I was called back and I went back. One of the challenges, obviously, that we have is, and I now wanted to show you how the policy can inform the decisions that you make and the impact of those policies. And one of the main things, and this is one of the issues that I discussed with Professor Bakia, and where we then talked about introducing a course on tax policy, was that most of the African countries went through the HIPIC program. And after HIPIC cured the debt stock challenges, but it didn't cure the cause of why African countries had high debt stock. And the reason African countries had higher debt stock was, one, their tax policies, the revenue they are getting from taxes were very low. Two, they had infrastructure gap. They needed to make sure that they undertake the infrastructure in order for them to have those services. And therefore, the question of just proper resource management was not the answer. And this is why I always pushed for us to introduce a tax policy course here, so that when we look at macroeconomic framework, we are talking about how do we balance the budget, increase taxation, reduce the borrowing, and rationalize expenditure. That is what basically we call fiscal consolidation. And this is one of the issues that then we did, and I'm very grateful to Professor Bakia that the tax policy course has been introduced. Probably the recommendation now is that it should not only be tax policy, it should be domestic resource mobilization, whether it's through tax policy, whether it's through non-tax policy, whether it's through government investment. Can we be able to see how we can increase domestic resource mobilization? I will be able to demonstrate to you some of the policy inconsistencies that we had in Zambia. I'll give you an example. Zambia is reliant on the mining sector. And between 2000 and 2015, we had changed the mining tax regime probably 15 times. And because of that, there was no investment that was going in the mining sector. In 1968, when Zambia became independent in 1964, in 1968, Zambia comparable to Chile, Chile is a copper producing country. Zambia comparable to Chile was producing more copper than Chile in 1964. By the time we reach now, Chile is producing about 5 million tons of copper. Zambia, until now, we are producing around 750,000 metric tons. And the question is, what caused this? I went to Chile in 2013, and the Chileans were telling us that they actually learned copper production from Zambia. They were getting Zambians to go and teach the Chilean on how to produce copper. They were seconding people from Chile to come to Zambia on how to produce copper. But because of the policy inconsistency, Zambia was stagnant and Chile became higher than that. Here is one of the issues that, that I wanted to demonstrate to you again to see the tax policy. In 2014, remember I told you a story of where I talked about the impossible trinity and then proposed that we should consolidate. And the election went on, and in March 2015, I was fired from the government, and the government went, instead of reducing, they increased the borrowing. And they borrowed at 9.4% of GDP. Now, the rule of the thumb will tell you that if a poor country borrows more than 3% of GDP to finance the budget, they will have challenges in financing, in paying back that debt. That is an economic rule of the thumb. 3%, you have challenges. Our colleagues in Indonesia, for instance, they now have put the fiscal rules where they are saying if there is a structural challenge, they can borrow beyond 3% of GDP to finance the budget. But they can only do it for consecutively 3 years. After that, they should go back. My advice in 2014 was that we reduce the borrowing. The outcome was increase the borrowing. We were borrowing at just below 3%. The borrowing started increasing, and in 2015 it was at 19.4 because our program was infrastructure development under the 60th National Development Plan. And we started borrowing. And when you look at this graph, the line on top there is showing you how much we are borrowing. And the line below there is showing you what the growth of the economy is. Now, correlation may not mean causality, but when you see the relationship, in the periods that we borrowed more, economic growth was less. And in the period that we controlled the borrowing, we have seen economic growth going up. Again, the professor is here. We can be able to test this theory. Is it correct that correlation means causality? So we had this challenge. And because of this challenge, we now had the budget and economic growth going up. And here I just wanted to show you, from 2006, the period that I was talking about, when you see how we were borrowing the fiscal deficit and the economic growth, you see economic growth averaging about 5%, about 6.4%, from 2006 to 2014. Coincidentally, I was in the Ministry of Finance during that period. It's a coincidence, isn't it? In 2015, I was fired. Borrowing started going up for infrastructure development. Economic growth started coming down. Now, again in economics, they say a real man or woman is seen not from the number of times that they fall down, but from the number of times that they always stand up when they fall down. And we see that when we had a challenge in 2015, economic growth continued going down. Exacerbated by the COVID-19, it became negative. The 2015 challenge was a challenge of a drought. Not that big a drought. When you go to 2024, we had the unprecedented drought in our history, where electricity supply to residential was only 4 hours in a day, because we depend on hydro. 90% of our electricity is hydro, and the reservoirs are dried. Where we declared a disaster. In 2015, there was even no disaster because people could manage. In 2024, we declared a disaster. And we had 86 out of 116 districts that did not have any food. And we then packaged a policy arrangement where we managed to mobilize resources and had emergency cash transfers to those districts. And we gave them cash, and we made sure we provided food in the strategic places that they would be able to buy. And look at the response. In 2004, in 2024, we had economic growth that the IMF had actually downgraded from our initial projection of 3% to 1.2%. At the end of it, economic growth was about 3.84%. In 2015, we were falling, we couldn't stand up. And this is where it shows. So you see the relationship. Before 2015, you see that the decision to consolidate, to ensure we had fiscal discipline, and to ensure that we target investment were bearing fruits, and the economy was growing at 6.4% on average. And by 2011, we became a lower middle income country. From 2015 to 2021, We went into high gear of borrowing because we wanted infrastructure. But that borrowing was crowding out the private investment, and it was increasing the cost of paying back the debt. This is a table that was prepared in one of the IMF annual reports. That basically shows what was the debt as a share of GDP for Zambia compared to average sub-Sahara country, and I picked just other 3 countries, Ghana, Tanzania, and Uganda. And in 2011, you see that Zambia was at 20.8% of GDP as its debt. And the only country that was below Zambia was Uganda at 20.5. And on average, Zambia was performing better because on average, sub-Saharan Africa country were at 24.9% of GDP. All these countries in sub-Saharan Africa were faced by the same problems. Each one of them made a policy choice. Zambia made a policy choice to borrow more money. The reason I was fired, they did that. And as we go to 2021, you see in 2015 we are 62.3%. As we go to 2021, Zambia becomes an outlier, 118%. What caused this? The same economists, Willis and the team, are in the Ministry of Finance. They were doing this. It's policy direction, isn't it? So we needed someone to give that policy direction. We needed someone to convince cabinet that what they were doing was wrong. Because an economist, unfortunately again, an economist is an advisor. And I told the current president when I was appointed, I said, me, I'm an advisor. If Tom wants to go to Albany, I'll tell Tom, what time do you want to go? The flight is at 12 hours. I'll tell him, start off at 10 so that you're in time. He says he'll be taking his child to school and he can only start off at 11. I'll tell him, when you start off at 11, the road may be bad, you might be. So in that case, can you go and sleep in Albany? He says, no, it's okay, I'll drive myself. I'll tell him, get a driver to drive you because probably you are not good at driving. He says, no, I'll drive myself, don't worry. And he drives himself and he gets on the way because he's over cruising, he is involved in an accident. I'm an advisor, I don't say I told you, Tom, because I'm telling Tom what are the options that he can choose from. How I package those options, this is what Williams College has taught us. This is what Williams College will teach you. Each one of us can be able to give this advice. But how do we package this advice so that it is bought by the politicians? Because the politicians are the ones that make a decision at the end of the day. We only advise. So we saw that, and because we saw that, we see this graph is basically showing you how different countries have been performing in terms of fiscal deficit, in terms of economic growth. And when you look at this graph, it is showing you that in the area days 2015 to 2021, Zambia was on the outlier in terms of the fiscal deficit, hence the challenge we faced. And when we look at the economic growth, again, you see that Zambia was below in the first part and now improving in the second part, being better than every other country. Because the money was going to debt service, our Vision 2030, remember, was saying that we wanted to be a prosperous middle-income country that would have health, that would have education, and we committed under the African charters, under the Abuja Declaration, under the Maputo, under the Education for All, of how much money we'll be putting to these sectors in order for us to achieve the minimal impact in terms of income inequality. At the time we are preparing the Vision 2030, our income inequality measured by the Gini coefficient was about 52%. And we said we wanted to bring that to 40%. As we speak now, that income inequality, instead of coming down, it started going up. And we are among the most unequal countries in Africa now. Probably South Africa, Botswana, Namibia are ahead of us, but we are in that region of inequality. And the reason was because we are taking the money to debt service, we now started reducing our expenditure in these priority sectors that we identified. And the impact, basically Zambia was becoming poorer. And we slid back from a lower middle income country in 2011 to a poor country in by now. And Zambia then became the first country to default on its debt service post-COVID. Policy inconsistencies and policy challenges. What have we done now? Some of the board decisions. We think that we need to rationalize and have well-placed subsidies. At that time, we had subsidies on electricity, we had subsidies on fuel. 50% of our electricity is consumed by the mining companies. And we are subsidizing 50%. It means we are giving mining companies 50% subsidy, isn't it? I was on one of the talk shows and we were debating on the subsidies with some NGOs. And the NGOs were saying the cost of living is high and therefore we need to subsidize fuel. And I was giving them an example. I'm secretary to the Treasury. I've been given a government car and I buy fuel. And my fuel I buy every month is about $5,300 or thereabout. My mother, who is poor, jumps on a bus. And she jumps on a bus to come to town once a month. And she pays 100 kwacha. 100 kwacha is about probably $4. For me, 50% is subsidy. It means I'm getting $150 subsidy every month. For my mother, she's getting $3, $4. She's getting $1.50 every month. Is that subsidy working for the poor? It is not working for the poor. But the rich people are the ones that will go and make noise and say subsidy is working for the poor. And the politicians will buy that. And the question is, how do we package this? And this is again one trick that we learned from Williams College. How do we package this? And we sat with the Minister of Finance and we said, how do we package? And we said, okay, let us agree that all the subsidies on fuel, on electricity, we remove them. But let us subsidize education, because the poor people are not affording to take their children to school. So then we removed the subsidies on electricity and fuel and told the Zambian people that this money that we are using on electricity and fuel, it will go into the education sector. Everyone take your children to school. Within 2 years, we had more than 2 million learners that had come out of school because they could not afford to pay fees. Their parents could not afford to pay fees. They came back and they are going to school. And obviously the opposition started shouting at the loudest that why are you remove the subsidy? This is not a caring government. And every time we had an opportunity, we always talked about how we can be able to use that subsidy, proper targeting. Again, that is the theory that we learned in here. That subsidy in itself is not bad, but targeting is bad. The fuel subsidy was bad because it was targeting the rich and not the poor. The education subsidy was good because the rich will take their children to fee-paying schools, the poor will take their children to government schools, and we subsidize government schools where the poor children go, and 2 million learners went back to school. And we think that will be able to reduce poverty. We then went ahead, and during that period, because the money was not enough, government then went to mining companies and changed the tax regime, and mining companies were folding up. We went back to the mining companies and we told them, we want an equal treatment. We want a fair return on your investment, but also a fair return on the owners of the mineral resources, the Zambian people. And we strike a balance, and we went and negotiated this. And because I was a champion of change, I was tasked to lead the team that was negotiating with the mining companies. And we reached the negotiations, and we managed to bring the mining companies up, and we have seen copper production started increasing. And now our objective is to be able to reach 3 million tons of copper production by the year 2031. And we think we are on course. And this year, we now are going towards 1 million. All along from 1968, we had never gone beyond 750,000 metric tons of copper production. But we have introduced predictability, consistency in the policy, and we have convinced the government we have achieved that. Restoration of the debt sustainability. I told you that we are the first country to default on our debt service post-COVID. And because we defaulted, all the investors ran away from Zambia. And the first thing that we had was that we need to have a reform. And we called it an economic transformational reform. And this economic transformational reform was now looking at how can we restructure our debt so that we can leave some fiscal space for us to undertake investment. How can we rationalize our expenditure? How can we increase our domestic revenues? And how can we make sure that we have efficiency and effectiveness? And one of the things that I went to sing to the president again, I told the president, you need to have what I call the triangle of hope. A triangle of hope, meaning you have got 3 legs. One leg is the political will. And we asked the president, will you be able to give us the political go-ahead, the political will for us to implement this economic reform? And the president and the cabinet said, yes, we'll be able to give you that. And they gave us that. And then we went and we said we needed to have an efficient and effective civil servants or public service. A public service that will be able to respond to the private sector. When the private sector says they are asking for an exemption, a public service that today, not tomorrow, not after tomorrow, will be able to respond and say, yes, we'll give you the exemption, or no, won't give you the exemption, so that the private sector can then be able to move. But we also needed a private sector that was dynamic. So those are the 3 principles that we set with the president. And how do we have the private sector that is dynamic? How do we have the civil service that is efficient? How do we have the feedback? And we agreed that let's have an institutional arrangement that would be able to give us this feedback. And we created a department called the Public-Private Dialogue Forum. That is under the president's office. That basically, on a day-to-day, they have got a dialogue with the private sector, they have got a dialogue with the public sector, and on a quarterly basis, they bring the public and the private sector together, and they will go to the public and say, you public, these are what the private sector are complaining about. Can we be able to improve? You public sector, this is the private sector, what they are complaining. You private sector, this is what the public sector are looking at. Can we be able to improve? And we think we have got very good dialogue, and we have been able to achieve that. The last time we had amendment to our Debt and Guarantees Authorization Act was in 1969. And we are using that law, 1969, even before I was born, to be able to manage our debt. And we realized that we needed some regulatory reforms in debt management. And in 2022, we amended our Debt Act, updated it, and now we report to Parliament when we are borrowing, when we prepare the budget. We now prepare what we call an annual borrowing plan. That goes to Parliament, and Parliament will have to debate what are we going to borrow, at what cost, for what purpose. At that time, the Minister of Finance will decide what to borrow, and then they go to Parliament. Now we say we need to open up. What are we going to borrow for? At what cost and for what purpose? And every quarter, we issue a debt bulletin that goes onto the Minister of Finance. If you go to the Minister of Finance website, Kevis would be able to give you the website. You will find that every quarter there is a debt bulletin. That basically is saying how much did we borrow, at what cost did we borrow, and for what purpose? And we believe that will be able to help us. But in order for us to complete the debt restructuring and to have the private sector confidence into what government was doing, we had to go on an IMF program. So we had a program, a 3-year program, that came to an end in October But the last review, the 60th review, we reached a staff level agreement, and the review date, I think, is 15th or 27th January, where the IMF mission team is taking that review to the board. And once we complete that, we have completed the program. So this is the program that anchored our debt restructuring. And then we went under the G20 Common Framework for Debt Relief. We went and undertook that. And again, as a champion of change, I was given that responsibility to spearhead that. And we see that the benefits that we are achieving. This is what I was talking about when I was talking about domestic resource mobilization. And because we have got the political will, when we are doing the debt restructuring, one of the issues we agreed with the IMF is that we must have a debt sustainability analysis. We do our own debt sustainability analysis, but we need to have an independent person to check what we are doing. And in that debt sustainability analysis, we're answering a question: what is debt sustainability for Zambia? And when we did the analysis, we saw that debt sustainability for Zambia means two things. We have got the flow indicator that says our debt service to revenues should not go more than 14%. Then we are sustainable. And our debt service to revenue was higher than 14%. And now then we had to employ a strategy on how do we reduce that. And we agreed on three things: expenditure rationalization, remove wasteful expenditure, reduce the expenditure to GDP ratio, revenue mobilization, increase the revenues, and therefore the difference becomes the gap. And that difference is what we are saying by rule of the thumb should not be more than 3% of GDP. And that is where we are. Our target in the medium term is to reduce that to 1% of GDP. Then we'll be able to achieve this. Why was this not done in 2015 when we had challenge? Because the politics were saying you cannot increase taxes for the Zambian people in 2015. And therefore, infrastructure development meant borrowing more money. Now we are saying the Zambian people should contribute. And it's unprecedented, and head of, and the IMF mission chief came to me and asked me several times, Felix, are you sure that in a year of election in Africa, and probably it's the first time in Africa, that you can reduce, you can go with a fiscal consolidation policy in the year of election? And I told them, I'm very sure, because I talked to the president, I talked to the Minister of Finance, and I told them we cannot lose the gains that we have. In 2024, in June, we went to Parliament. Because the ratio of 14%, our debt service is about $930 million. Our domestic revenues was $6.9 billion. When you do that division, you get 15%. I went to Cabinet in mid-June and said, we are missing our debt sustainability target. Can we increase the taxes? And ahead of going towards the election, we convinced the Cabinet, and the Cabinet increased the taxes in June 2024. In January 2025, we introduced new tax measures because we want to achieve that. And we have got the political will. And we hope we have got the efficient and effective civil service. And we hope we'll have the dynamic private sector. And now we are seeing that as we are doing that, we have seen investment in the mining sector alone over this period that I'm talking about is going more than $12 billion. We now have got an energy compact because we have got a challenge in the energy sector where we called the private sector and say, private sector, let's sit together. What can we do in the energy sector? The private sector says, if you undertake these reforms, we should be able to come up with the financing. And we came up with a budget and the energy compact of $11.6 billion. And the private sector says they will mobilize $9.5 billion. And government should put the difference, which is about $2.9 million. And we are undertaking that. And again, I am a champion of change. I am in the Ministry of Finance, and I was given that that responsibility to head that challenge. Where do I get this champion of change? Where do I get this reform? Where do I get this packaging to convince everyone? It's Williams College. I made the right decision in 2024 not to go to Bath University, but to come to Williams College. The same colleagues that have been running the Ministry of Finance, even during the time I was out, they are the same colleagues that are running. The only difference is that they have got their supervisor who is a champion of change, who is pushing for them, who is helping to put this together. And we have got the political will. Let me make some conclusions before I end. One is that Zambia's fiscal turnaround is real and measurable. And I think I've shown you. Just now, everyone is talking about the exchange rate. In 2020, January 2024, we have had our appreciation of the kwacha of about 10%. In the last 5 days, our kwacha has appreciated about 4%. And when you look at what are these parameters that are bringing about the kwacha appreciation, one is that we have now agreed that the fiscal policy should talk to the monetary policy. And we agreed on the monetary policy that forget about the interest rates. If they go high, let them go high. Our target number one is inflation. Can we control inflation? Second is that we have got a surge in the copper prices, and Zambia is a copper producing country. And therefore, we have got that advantage that is coming in. Third is that then we agreed, because everyone was speculating, then we agreed that we come up with what we are calling the de-dollarization policy. If you are transacting in Zambia with a Zambian company, why would you want to transact in dollars? And we agreed we would transact in kwachas. Fourth, we then agreed that we have got a lot of Chinese investment in the mining sector. And we agreed that we introduce the Chinese yuan into our basket, and that the Chinese would pay in 2 yuan. And that when we are servicing the debt for China, we don't service it in dollar, we service it in yuan. And we have seen the benefit that is coming. From 2022 up to 2024, we saw inflation month on month increasing. In May 2024, we started seeing the stabilization, and the inflation month on month has been reducing. And we are targeting that to go from 22% that we had before May to about 6 to 8% inflation target. And this is what we are calling macroeconomic stability. And we believe with the macroeconomic stability, with the investment that is coming on the private sector, and now we are saying, why should we undertake some of the investment on the Treasury government balance sheet? And we have introduced what we call private-public partnerships. One of the many roads that crosses from the central Lusaka onto the Copper Belt, we have got a PPP project that is being sponsored completely outside the balance sheet. And we believe most of this project will be sponsored out of the balance sheet. We now have the UN. When there was a meeting in Spain, the UN was announcing that Zambia now has got its manufacturing base increasing, and we are among the top 10 that are doing that manufacturing. And therefore, we are seeing a lot of exports, and we'll be able to be seeing more appreciation of the kwacha, more stability, and more economic growth. Is this happening because I'm secretary to the Treasury? Is it happening because of Williams College? Would it have happened even if I was not there? We don't know. Correlation does not mean causality. Obviously, I've already talked about the efficiency of subsidy, the policy consistency, and the reform momentum that we are creating. Everywhere where I speak, I always say, now that we have achieved the debt restructuring, my number one objective wherever I go is to talk about investment. If I was to talk 3 things, I'll be talking about investment as thing number 1, investment as number 2, and investment as number 3. That is what we are talking about now. What are my personal lessons? One is that a strong technical foundation matters. It is very simple for me. Having had worked in the government and the reputation, went and worked with the cooperating partners, the IMF, the World Bank, When we had a challenge of the drought in 2024, I called the IMF, the World Bank. Not in an official meeting, unofficially, over a cup of tea, and I told them, colleagues, I've got this problem. How do you help me resolve it? In 2013, we had a problem with the Kariba Dam. This is the main hydro generator. It had not been rehabilitated. The plunge pool, where when the water is falling goes, it had gone deeper by 80 meters from the base. And they were saying that the foundation will be compromised. And the engineers for Kariba Dam said that they were not able to have this, to continue unless they got an indemnity, because one day the Kariba Dam will fall back. And the Zambezi River Authority that manages the Kariba Dam had failed to find the resources, commercial or concessional, that they could have been able to use. And in one of the meetings, because I was PS in the Ministry of Finance in 2012, in one of the meetings, the Minister of Finance talked to the colleague. Kariba Dam is a joint operation between Zimbabwe and Zambia. The Minister of Finance Zambia talked to his Minister of Finance colleague in a Council of Ministers meeting and said, Minister Chinamasa, I've got an officer that can be able to mobilize these resources. Can we empower him? And Chinamasa says, yes, why not? And they empowered me. And within 1 year, I mobilized $294 million for Kariba Dam rehabilitation. They failed to find commercial loan. I found concessional loan. $161 million of that was grant from the EU, from the African Development Bank, and from Sweden. The Swedish guy arrived in the country when I was meeting the DFID permanent secretary in the evening, and from the airport he came for that meeting. And when we finished that meeting and I was explaining to the DFID colleague what we are doing in Zambia and how I need his support, the Swedish colleague calls me on the side and he says, I have never come across a civil servant that is as knowledgeable as you are. Can I commit? And I told him, what are you going to commit? He says, give me 1 week. I will bring $25 million. And within 1 week, he called me and says, $25 million has come. So within 1 year, we mobilized those resources, and Kariba Dam is being rehabilitated. Where did I learn this from? Williams College. Professor Bruton says, continue, make the policy. If it is not adopted, go back, relook at that policy you have made. Where are you weak? Where are you strong? Until you convince someone. When I left the government, I went into private sector. I had a relationship with the cooperating partners. And I have a relationship where I can call someone, whether it's at the IMF, whether it's at the World Bank, and we'll have the meeting. The IMF now have got what they call sovereign debt roundtable meetings. And it is for ministers of finance, and the deputies prepare. And I am part of the deputies that prepare for that. All along, and I'm the only voice, unfortunate, from the developing countries that speak in that meeting. We have other developing countries that attend those meetings, but rarely you hear them speak. I'm the only voice. And when we are speaking, if that meeting is co-chaired by the IMF, the World Bank, and the G20 chairperson, if that meeting is called and I tell them I'm busy, I won't be able to attend, they will probably change that meeting to a period that I was there, because they always want to hear the side of the data. And the side of the data and the advice that I've always been giving is that if we are transparent, if we are realistic, if we can do the right thing, let us achieve that, and we can achieve it. Sometimes the unexpected happen. In 2015, I was fired for the advice I gave. And I remember Tobias Rasmussen, the IMF mission chief, country director then. After I was fired, he called me for lunch and he told me, young man, you are lucky that you have been moved out. Your CV will be clean. We see that these people do the wrong things. And at the end of the day, it happened. So basically, the story I'm telling is that it is a story where part of the team, the economy is performing. I'm removed from the team, the economy is not performing. I come back to the team, the economy starts performing. Does correlation means causality? And I want to end here and just tell you that apart from farming, I do agriculture, and that is my field in 2024. That's the plant in 2024. That's my wife, myself, and our 2 workers, and those are the animals that I keep. Let me end here and probably open up to question and answer. I don't know whether you want to moderate the question or answer, or you can go straight. I can moderate it myself.
Happy for you to moderate and
Thank
call
you.
on people with questions. Please limit it to 1 question at a time so that more can participate. But first, let us give a round of applause. And when you do ask questions, say who you are and where you're from.
So question and answers. Yes, madam.
Hello, I'm Rubana from Pakistan, and I was listening to you. You were saying that earlier Zambia had development plans, then they stopped that, and then they inculcated the development plans. So, what's the comparison between and why then the countries stopped having development plans? Like, what is the comparison between the time periods? When you have development plans and when you don't have development plans? And if the development plans are that beneficial, why the countries stop these development plans?
Thank you very much. That is a very good question. So why did we stop the development plan? In the olden days, transparency was very difficult. And the development plan basically meant, what do you plan to do? What have you done? And what was always coming out in those development plans was that what was planned to be done was not exactly what was done. And obviously then the people were asking, you told us you are going to do this in your plan. Why have you done something different? And the question that became a bit difficult, and therefore the political will at that time then decided, instead of us answering these questions, let's do away with development plans and we'll be able to lead the government without these plans. So that was the main reason why the development plan happened. How can we compare between the development plan and the period without the development plan? So apart from the hump that I showed you in 2015 to 2021, during the period where we didn't have the development plan, remember I told you that Chile was producing less copper than Zambia was producing. Zambia did not succeed in its implementation. We were a population of 3 million people producing 750,000 tons of copper. We went to become a population of 10, 15 million people. We are still producing 750,000 metric tons of copper. On average, Zambia became poorer than we were before. And this is why we introduced the development plan. And we saw that we started going on a trajectory that was leading us to the Vision 2030. Until 2015, and when you look at the budget in 2015, and I did this work for Oxfam, and actually I got the consultants from the World Bank through this work, because one of the economists in Washington, when the World Bank were asking for someone that they could find, I just referred them to the work that I did. I'm told it's on the website on the Oxfam, and it's entitled Beyond the Numbers, What Does the 2017 Budget Say? And basically I was looking at the budget of 2017 for Zambia as a consultant, and I was telling them, yes, the number means this, but what the actual budget is saying is completely different from the numbers. So we had a situation that was like that, and we are hoping that we'll be able to follow the development plan and we'll be able to achieve the Vision 2030. And the Vision 2030 has got socio-economic objective. One of them is to make sure that we reduce income inequality. The other one is to make sure that we control the macroeconomics, have consistent economic growth, have inflation consistent low, and the other one is that we need to have clean water, reticulated water for everyone. And this came from the World Bank and the work that was basically showing that because of the dirty water in Zambia, we are losing about $1 billion every year for people that are not working and for people that are going to hospital. And if we can clean the water, we can have productivity. Because productivity is very low now, we can have productivity. So we are now going to that where we are now saying, let us be accountable to what we... So first and foremost, you tell the people what you are going to do. And because you have gone to the people are going to say, do they agree, don't they agree? Do they amend something? And thereafter, then you start implementing, and you go back to the people and say, we told you we are going to do this, we will do that.
So now you are presuming that transparency has improved?
We have improved transparency, but we will continue improving transparency. Remember, we were borrowing and spending and never told anyone. Now, before we borrow, we go to Parliament and tell Parliament why we are borrowing, with an annual borrowing plan that we publish. The Select Committee on Parliament then calls stakeholders. The government wants to borrow this money. Do you agree? Do you have reservations? And on a quarterly basis, we go back and report. As we speak now, on the 29th, I will be speaking before a symposium, telling them how the 2025 budget performed, where we failed, where we have succeeded, what we are going to do different in 2026, that we'll be able to do this. And we believe that now we have seen a lot of interest from stakeholders, cooperating partners, for instance, civil society organization, and the private sector now that are following and every time giving us comments and telling us where we should improve. And we believe that we will be able to achieve that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes. Oh, there.
Good morning, Dingase from Malawi. First of all, I'd like to commend you for the comprehensive presentation. It's refreshing to see that a sister country is doing quite well in areas that sometimes may seem impossible in our own countries. My question is basically trying to understand how you moved back into the system after CDE, because you mentioned that you left 2005 and immediately in 2006 you were promoted. I would like to understand how you eased back in the system, because how I look at it is that government is a system, and even as I'm here right now, it's still rolling. I'll go back, and sometimes it's challenging for you to show the expertise that you have learned from an institution. You find that the challenges of how people will let you in and show what you can do. And I would like you to walk us through how you managed to show your expertise.
Thank you very much. Obviously, part of it is probably lucky, and part of it is the type of supervisors that I had. So I had the Minister of Finance, the late Honorable Magande, and I had my supervisor, Mr. Emmanuel Ngurube. Tom, you know Mr. Emmanuel Ngurube. So Mr. Emmanuel Ngurube was a type of a person, when you go for a meeting and you understand your work, he will let you speak in the meeting. Most of the supervisors, they want you to speak through them, and therefore you won't be able to express yourself. But what I did every time when I went back to Zambia is that on every point, I would write a paper. I always wrote something, I would write a paper. On subsidy, I went and wrote a paper. Immediately I arrived, and we are now doing the disaster management, where when there's a disaster, someone takes. And I wrote a paper where I said, instead of us taking maize and giving the people that will be able to mill, if we engage the company that takes the mini mill, the cost will be this. If we take the maize, the cost will be that. And therefore, I believe in this. And the Minister of Finance agreed with me as a junior economist. But when it went to cabinet, the vice president says, if we take a mini mill, a milling company takes the mini mill, those people who think it's the milling company that is intervening and not us, we need to be seen. So that was rejected in 2006. But I continued pushing, as Professor Bruton told us. When we had a disaster management, disaster problem now in 2024, there was again the issue of the DMMU saying, no, we cannot do this. But at that time, because I had the pulling power, then I called the cooperating partners and I said, I want someone to quickly do a survey. What do the people on the ground want? And the British government says, we'll help you with that survey. And this is the connection that I talk about. The British people did the survey, and that survey showed that 95% of the Zambian people said, give us the money, we'll decide what to buy. Because if we gave cooking oil, probably cooking oil will be sold in Lusaka and the people will not get. And we identified those people that needed, and we gave them the money. And because they were able to buy, it means they provided demand. And because they provided demand, it means supply was coming. And that was one of the reasons why growth did not go down, but it continued. Now, it took from 2005 to 2024 to agree on that policy. Did I give up on that policy? I never gave up. So sometimes the change will happen in your time. Sometimes change will happen after you have left. Fortunate for me, change happened in my time. When the PF government came into power in 2011, the Minister of Finance that came, I had never met the president, I had never met the Minister of Finance. But every day I would write something, in the meeting I would say something. One day the Minister of Finance goes to the president and says, Mr. President, we are wasting bringing permanent secretaries here. The person who knows the work is this guy. Can I promote him to be permanent secretary? And the president says, it's your ministry. And I was appointed permanent secretary. And when the minister made a decision in cabinet and cabinet approved, and I told the minister, I said, that decision is not correct, minister, here are the issues. And the minister says, but the president already approved. I wrote a letter, I said, send it to the president. And the minister sent that letter to the president, and when the president read that letter, he agreed. And obviously behind it, they discussed who is behind this. And we reached a point now whenever there was a decision, a policy decision that was made either in the Ministry of Finance, in the Central Bank, in the Zambia Revenue Authority, or any of the institutions under the Ministry of Finance, even when they agree in cabinet, the late President Sata would call me on the side and say, this decision was made, you are not there. What do you think about it? And if I say no, the late Sata would then not implement that decision. So that's the impact that I have. And this is why within 9 years of coming from Williams College, I went through the rank and I reached the highest level as permanent secretary. So part of it was lucky. Part of it is the people that I worked with that exposed me. Part of it is that push that Professor Bruton always talked about. Don't give up. I never gave up from 2006 to 2024, and the policy now in 2024 was accepted. We had the FISIP that was rejected. I went to the Ministry of Finance in 2001. The first year, they wanted direct input support. They buy the goods, they give the farmers, and I was always insisting this does not work. 2001, it was not implemented. We refined it. 2002, it was not implemented. We refined it. 2003, it was rejected. We refined it. 2004, it was implemented. It has the best result. The champion now that is championing that reform is the Minister of Agriculture. The person who rejected it now is the one who is championing and saying this reform works. So don't give up. Continue pushing. Some of it will happen in your time. Some of it will happen with the people that come after you. I was lucky it happened in my time. Yes, madam.
Just to compare with other speakers, let me say thank you for a word-related presentation. So I'm Benedetta from Malawi. I have a question. However, you have a situation where you are trying to make a decision under pressure. Let's say a situation whereby you have an economic option that is technically correct, but then it's being conflicted with, let's say, political,
Yes, I have. And this is what I was saying when I was giving an example. My job is to advise. I give an advice. If I give an advice and you don't pick my advice, and then I get annoyed, it means I'm not a good advisor. A good advisor is the one who gives option. An economist always gives option. And this is why Professor Montiel always said economics is the simplest subject to study. And I believe him. Because there's no wrong or right answer. Every answer, it depends on the assumption you make. So you cannot get anything wrong in economics. Every answer depends on the assumptions you put. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you for your really interesting presentation about your experience. I'm Tatia from Georgia. I have a question about the tax revenue. You mentioned that you rose taxes in 2024. What type of taxes did you
So,
there are many types of taxes, and public would react differently to it.
yes, so the main taxes that we hold, so the way there is tax system in Zambia, we basically have got different types. We have got the value-added tax.
Yes.
Under the value-added tax, we have got what we call the standard rated schedule, the zero rated schedule, and the exemption schedule. And what we did not change the VAT standard rate. We left it the same, but we went into the schedules and removed some of the goods that were zero rated to standard rated, removed the goods that were exempted to standard rated. And that is one of the reforms that we undertook. Then we went into the income tax. We did not touch the pay as you earn. It has always been a custom that every year you reduce the pay as you earn, or you increase the exempt threshold for the pay as you earn. Again, unprecedented, we went to the government and told them we cannot afford to increase the exemption, and we didn't touch that. But the company income tax, we looked at the exemption, the zero, and we then brought them back. We had different rates of company income tax. For the agriculture sector is 15%, the standard is 35%, the mining is 30%, and we started unifying that, and we agreed that the unification will be around 20-30%, and we started by looking at the law and taking them up. And then we went on to the customs and excise. We are under CDE and COMESA protocol, and we have a lot of suspensions that we did that, and we agreed that we bring some of those suspensions back on board, and I think we did half of that, and we brought them back on board. What we are doing now to make sure that there is transparency, we are now even publishing what we are calling tax expenditure report. The tax exemption that we have given, how much would they have amounted in expenditure if we didn't give? And we are publishing that report. We published the last one in December so that the Zambian people can be able to see how much money we are foregoing because we are giving these tax exemptions, and whether these tax exemptions are working, or it will make sense for us to get this money and target the support that is needed. Yes, madam.
Last one, I think. Well,
Thank you. We can continue discussing after this. I'm still around up to tomorrow, probably 14 hours, so we can continue discussing. But yes.
Miura from Madagascar. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very inspiring. My question is about the electricity and fuel subsidy policy. We saw during our lectures and empirical evidence that those kind of policy is subject to a strong resistance. So I would like to know if you have faced any challenges when you implemented this policy, and you said also you were the leader of the negotiation with the mining sector. So can you share with us what lesson you learned from the negotiation, and some tips of negotiation when it will happen to us to negotiate with those kind of bigger firms? Thank you.
So thank you very much. Did we face any resistance? Again, yes. In 2013, when I became PS in charge of economic management in 2012, in 2013, I took that policy to cabinet to say, let's change the way we do subsidy. It was rejected. Again, as Professor Bruton said, continue pushing. In 2022, I took back that policy to cabinet when I came back. This time it was accepted. Same policy that was rejected, accepted. Obviously it was repackaged. What are some of the lessons I've learned in this negotiation? I've undertaken a lot of discussion and led a lot of negotiations. One is that you must prepare. The person you are negotiating with, sitting across the table, immediately they realize you don't know what you are doing, you won't convince them. Immediately they realize you know better than them, they will start believing that you are saying the truth. So we did the Millennium Challenge Compact 2, where the American government was supposed to give us $458 million grant. That goes to infrastructure development. And We negotiated, I led the negotiation, and we had the record time negotiations with the MCC in Washington, and it was signed. And then Trump came into office with the America First policy. Then they said that they will suspend that. I quickly rushed to the president and told the president, Mr. President, write a letter. They are talking about America First. We have got a project that we are doing. Can we write a letter to say we can realign this MCC project to meet the objectives of the Americans? And I will lead the realignment. And the president wrote a letter to the chairperson of the MCC, who is the Minister of State, the Secretary of State. And the chairperson then says, okay, let's postpone the decision making to December, and we see the realignment. And I led a team, we provided a realignment document, and we submitted on 10th December, the MCC approved that program for Zambia. Instead of canceling it, we are going to get the money and we're going to proceed. Again, it's a question of being ahead, making sure that you are prepared, sacrificing to read like the professor sacrifices to read before he teaches. Thank you very much.
Yes.
We will continue discussing.